Welcome back to Mixtapes to Myself. So, to those of you just joining us, thank you so much. Welcome. To those of you who are coming back for more, thank you so much. Welcome back. As always, like, share, and subscribe, and comment. I do read them. Now, on to it. The last we saw Sam, college age Sam from 2008, who has traveled here, spent a whole day in the life of being a middle school teacher. And it scared her, but it turned out she really, really liked it. She learned that if she went in with an open mind and a really big heart, that it turns out it's not as scary as it seemed before. So now we move forward and see if Sam can survive a party as her future self and see if anybody notices any differences. So now we move forward in Mixtapes to Myself to chapter 17, post 754, The Bar That Time Forgot. The directions on her phone had her going to somewhere called post 754. She had no idea what a post 754 was, but she had come this far, so there really was no turning back now. The route was a beautiful drive with rolling hills, beautiful farmlands, and woodlands, all interspersed. About 10 minutes away from the location, she noticed that everything seemed to start looking like the cliches you see in the movies about small towns. She absolutely loved it. There were banners and flags hanging from the streetlights for the university in town. The center of town itself was a collection of brick buildings with the businesses on the bottom floors, their changing business fronts differentiating each one from the one beside it. She turned right at the light and made her way, albeit very slowly because of the crosswalks and hundreds of pedestrians taking advantage of the beautiful weather. Finally, she passed over a set of train tracks that were directly next to a parking lot that her phone was directing her towards. It was a wooden-sided building with a collection of flags hanging above the front door, as well as a full flagpole with the American flag standing proudly at the front. An old plastic light-up sign hung from the front of the building that showed Post 754. She parked her car in the back row of the lot, facing a grassy lawn lined with trees. She looked at the clock on her dashboard and it read 4:33. She was in no rush, so she sat there, breathing deep and trying to process everything the day had brought her thus far. She was wholly shocked at how good of a time she had teaching middle school. The content had been fun, as they had been finishing up ancient Greece in her 7th grade and Australian Oceania in her 6th. That wouldn't shock anyone because Sam loved information, research, and fun facts, as Jacob liked to call them. There was a reason she was on the honors track in her history department. The world, both before, now, and in the future, had always, and she assumed would always, fascinate her. The thing that had shocked her was how fast her reticence and reluctance had melted at the students themselves. She had imagined middle schoolers like a group of honey badgers that could take down prey several times their size. She had memories of her own classmates absolutely torturing the weaker junior high school teachers and feeling zero care or remorse for their actions. Today, however, had been a breath of fresh air and she had loved literally every second of it. She was also aware that a lot of that was the love and trust that older Sam, who actually belonged here, had put into her classroom and her students. But she was excited at the glimpse of what she was truly capable of. She glanced at the clock again, and it was nearing 5 o'clock. So she started to mentally prepare herself to peel back yet another curtain of her future life. She pulled down her visor, checked her hair in the mirror, while also giving her outfit a once over to make sure she didn't look stupid, at least. She opened her purse and grabbed her wallet, which contained a few 20s with a little note that said, "Cash only tonight." Sam had giggled at the note because she really would become the kind of person who thinks of everything. And Sam, who belonged here, really had thought of literally everything. She placed her wallet in her purse and looked back into the visor, giving herself the best pep talk she could muster. "You had such a good day today. It would be a shame to ruin it by being too worried to go into a bar for a party with a bunch of people you don't know." She laughed and then looked back into the mirror at herself. "Just be yourself," or she paused, letting the thought marinate in her brain juices for a second. "Be the best imitation of what yourself could be right now. You can do this, dude." She popped the visor back up, took her keys out of the ignition, and got out of the car. An author's note. And this one is a little sad, to be honest. But torturing junior high school teachers. I will say in junior high school, other than having a really bad attitude and a Spanish teacher that I definitely hated and tortured as much as I could, but he deserved it. If you want that story, I can do a whole series of that on my shorts and my TikTok. Hate that man to this day. Would punch him in the face. Other than that, I was pretty nice to my junior high teachers. I didn't really have a lot of conflict. I didn't really have a lot of conflict with most of my teachers. I know in high school, I did have one teacher that we did have some conflict. And it's the only time I got called into the vice principal's office, and he was like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "He did this and he did that, and I don't like him." And he was like, "Well, you need to get it together." And we fixed it, and he became my favorite teacher. So, I don't know. Other than like a really bad attitude and being a little bit scary, I was pretty chill. But there are some stories from when I was in junior high. Um, I know we had a science teacher who she was strange, but she had a bunch of like specimen jars, and they like rolled all of our specimen jars out onto the roof, like some real crazy stuff in junior high of like just like mean stuff. And like you look back on it when you're an adult and you're like, "Oh, middle school is terrifying." And it can be like 100%. I'm not saying that like my entire middle school career has been like pleasant. We've had our moments. There have been moments of abject terror. I'm saying for the most part, it has been a beautiful journey filled with wonderful kids who I love with all of my heart and soul. Um, but let me know if you have any either horror stories of when you were in school and the scary things that kids did, or if you're a teacher, horror stories of things you've had to go through as an educator, whether by the hands of students or parents. Anyways, back to the story. She shut the door And as she was walking towards the back of the building, she heard the big steel door creak open. A giant of a man walked out into the sun and squinted against the brightness. When he saw her walking towards the door, he shouted, "Sam!" at the top of an absolutely booming voice. He walked towards her with a slight limp to his gait. He was wearing a t-shirt that looked like orange sherbet, torn jeans, and an old tattered baseball cap on his head. He had the tanned, weathered skin of someone who had been working outside for most of their lives. She waved and said hello, and he asked if she was working tonight. She replied that she was here for the party, and he said jovially, "Well, I was going to head home, but now I'll stay for one more." She could tell just from this small interaction that he was a bigger than life type of guy. She walked into the big steel doors, and there were 3 steps up to a closed wooden door, but then a series of steps down into a basement that music was wafting up from. She started walking down the carpeted stairs, holding on to the railing as she went, and the minute her feet cleared the ceiling, she could hear a resounding "Sam!" come from the bar. "Geez," she said, giggling. "Did I just walk into Cheers?" As she walked to the bottom of the stairs. The giant man chuckled behind her as he sang, "Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name," loudly and very off key. A guy at the bar looked over and shouted, "Johnny, is Sam making her Cheers joke again?" Maybe pretending to be herself wouldn't actually be that hard, she thought and smiled. The bar was like stepping into a time capsule. Wood paneling on the walls, a horrible looking carpet on the floor, an old jukebox in the corner, and next to that, a pool table with a large light hanging above it. There were small square tables with wooden chairs next to the pool table. There were tall wooden chairs pushed up next to the bar top, which fit about 12 people, with a square beam in the middle splitting it in 2 sides. Behind the bar was a large cooler with a glass front displaying rows and rows of various bottles, which sat right next to an old metal cash register that reminded her of the store. As she walked in, everyone said hi to her, and by everyone, she meant it. There was a chorus of hellos coming from the bar, welcoming her and genuinely happy to see her. Sam had a flashback to what her 17-year-old self would be experiencing tonight, walking through the party and being greeted by quite literally everyone. She had never been popular in school, but it seemed that the older she got, the more popular she became. She shook that thought and realized a more subtle but a far more solid conclusion. The older she got, the more of her village she seemed to discover. The word popular isn't really used as much once you get out of high school. You may use it in college, depending on the environment you end up in, but the word slowly loses meaning as the years wane on. However, you start to collect people, for lack of a better term. You start finding the friends who will always be there when you need them, who will sit there with you during hard times and listen to you rage or whine or cry. They'll pat your back or squeeze your arm or just sit there in respectful silence. And the thing is, you'll do the exact same thing for them in an instant. If you're lucky, and most importantly, and Sam believed this with all her heart, leading your life with kindness and love, then you'll find the friends who will slowly become indispensable. They'll become your family. Right now, Sam was at least 2 hours away from the place she had grown up. this was the first time that she hadn't seen her family during a jump, and yet she hadn't felt the sadness or the longing she would have assumed she would, because at every single turn there was someone with a smile who clearly had love for her and who she had clearly poured love right back into. Author's note. This is just going to be a small one because I think I cover it pretty well in the chapter itself. But I think it's a really funny distinction that you learn when you're older. Because when you're younger, you think like, oh, everybody likes that person, nobody likes that person is popular, that person is not popular. And as you get older, you realize it doesn't matter. Like, I've found in my own personal life and like, all aspects of my life, personal, professional, whatever, that I try to always lead with kindness. You still make mistakes. You still have people who don't like you. It's just going to happen. But you do find a way to like slowly build a village. And then sometimes there really is no village, and you have to be on you and be okay with you. And that's a really hard thing for some people to do. It took me a really long time to be okay just being on my own, being by myself. So, you know, it's a big part of this story is all about, finding yourself, finding your place, finding your people, but also realizing that, like, granted, time travel is not going to happen for all of us, right? This is fiction. But there is a certain amount of stumbling that happens throughout life. There will be moments where you're not sure what's going on. You're not sure what the future holds. You're not sure what's going to happen. And you have to figure it out. You have to adjust. You have to throw your shoulders back, keep your chin up, and just keep going. And that's kind of like what all of these things are about. In this chapter, it's about, she figured out, oh, I think I found my place. She has the school filled with, students who clearly love her, a best friend teacher, coworkers who are clearly friendly. She goes to this post 754 and she finds all these people who are invested in her and her life and her future and who she is. But the thing is, you don't get that unless you lead here. If you lead, and I used to tell my students, specifically my students here in McNess, lead with your chest. And if you lead with this, you can't go wrong. Like I said, everybody makes mistakes, everybody missteps, everybody is going to screw up. That's life. But if you try your best to make sure this is good, you'll find your village. And if at this moment you feel like you're never going to find your village and you're all by yourself and whatever, comment. I'll be your village. Hello. This is your village. Welcome. All right, back to the story. The woman behind the bar shouted a hello and walked to the back room. All of a sudden, she felt a hand wind its way around her waist and it pulled her into a sideways hug. She cocked her head to the side and found an older man with blue eyes, curly gray and white hair, and a goatee saying, "How are you doing, Sammy?" She looked down at his hand and he immediately removed it and said, "Oh, sorry, didn't mean to offend." while the small blonde woman sitting next to him rolled her eyes at him with her whole neck and said with the sweetest smile, "Sam, just ignore Les. How was your day?" The man sitting next to her looked shocked for a moment and held his hand to his chest like a leading lady in a classic movie. But she told the woman that her day had gone just fine, and she was just there for the going away party. Sam was informed that she was early, but she had figured she would be. However, she also knew she was nervous, and a little liquid courage never hurt anyone in these kinds of situations. She watched as Les drained his glass and pushed it on its cheap cardboard coaster to the back edge of the bar, placing a poker chip next to it. There were no seats next to Beth, so Sam went to the other side of the bar and took a seat next to Johnny. She opened her wallet and pulled out a 20, still chuckling at the note from herself. She should have left something for the Sam who was visiting her timeline, but she hadn't even thought about it before now. Now at least she knew for a fact that she would do it for each version in the future. The woman behind the bar came back out and started pouring Les a drink in the same glass. Sam's face clearly looked confused, and Les had explained, "You never get rid of seasoned ice." And Sam had cracked up laughing. She had taken a short bartending course once, and one of the cardinal rules was to always start with a fresh glass. She had never in her life heard of seasoned ice, but she found it absolutely hilarious. The woman placed Les's drink back in front of him, and he took the small glass in his huge hands, index finger holding back the tiny plastic straw. "Thanks, Monica," he said before he took the first sip. Sam had noticed a small poster on the fridge door that advertised something called a Shutesbury Squeeze. So she went with that. She discovered that it was made with a locally produced vodka and pink lemonade, which she thought was absolutely perfect. As the woman behind the bar placed the drink in front of her, she went to put her 20 down, but Johnny wouldn't hear it. He pulled out a wad of cash and told her that he was paying for Sam, but also to set Les and Beth up, and then glancing at the rest of the bar said, "Ah, hell, just set up the bar." Everyone shouted their thanks, and poker chips were handed out to everyone who wasn't ready for their next drink. Sam was sipping her drink when she heard her phone buzz. She pulled it out of her purse and saw a text from Nick. "Hey, welcome to the future, I guess. Where are you now?" Sam smiled and quickly texted that she was at post 754 and was supposed to be at a going away party tonight. She placed the phone back down on the bar and took another sip of the Shutesbury Squeeze. The drink was simply delicious, but she had to actively remind herself not to drink it too quickly. She sat quietly listening to the conversations going on around the bar while passively watching some random show that was wafting from the television. She heard the big metal door open at the top of the stairs and saw blue skies from the outside peek into the bar for just a moment. A pair of huge tan work boots made their way down the stairs until they stomped to the bottom. Another huge man walked in, and everyone shouted their hellos to Timmy. He had the windswept yellow hair of a 70s TV star, but had a downright cherubic face. He also had the look of someone who had worked outside a lot, but not quite as long as Johnny had. He walked behind her and gripped her shoulders firmly as a greeting. "Hey, Sam," he said, as he squeezed and released them before doing the same thing to Beth and adding a kiss on the cheek. Timmy had this calming, comforting presence that Sam could feel, almost as if his giant hands had transferred that energy straight to her like a live wire. He sat down and ordered his drink while striking up a conversation with the other end of the bar. Bob, a tall man who had been sitting next to Les, stood up and gave Tommy his seat while finishing his bottle of Bud. He took his final swig, gave everyone a big smile while waving and reminding everyone that he would see them tomorrow. Sam continued to just quietly observe, and what she found was that this bar had a familiar feel to it. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone seemed to care about what was going on in each other's lives. Sam could understand why this ended up being one of her places in the future. Her phone buzzed again, and she looked at another text from Nick. Hey, I'll come down and hang out. Might take me a while because you moved kind of far, but I'll be there. Awesome, she thought to herself while typing much of the same back to Nick. So she just had to hang in there until Nick got there, and then she'd at least know someone. The door opened again. This one is a melancholy author's note. So the Post 754 is a real place. All of the descriptions are real. All of the people are based on real people. Some of it is based on real things that used to happen. Like, yes, Les used to love grabbing me around the waist and like hugging me in a side hug, and I'd be like, "Rah." And his wife Beth would be like, "Get off of her," because she was the best and I loved her. That was a terrible Beth voice, by the way. I don't know where that came from. Unfortunately, they are no longer with us. I threw Mickey in too because he is also no longer with us. But they were my friends. They were my people. I loved them so much. I wish I could have included more people, but unfortunately, it just didn't fit with the plot itself. In the future, I do hope to kind of write like little vignettes for each of these timelines so that we can get kind of a more well-rounded idea of like what this section of time was really like, because right now it's very disjointed, which I understand, but yes, the Post 754 was a real place. I say was because the building has since been torn down. So no longer, like, not only are a lot of the people who made the 754 what it was, the building isn't even there anymore. So unfortunately, it's gone. Spent many years, and that place did become my village. We had a lot of great times. There were a lot of sad times, but that place meant a lot to a lot of people. A lot of people. And I am thankful frequently that I was able to call that place and all of those people my friends. Anyways, back to the end of the story. The door opened again with a sliver of blue skies, and another pair of shoes appeared. This time, white sneakers with socks pulled all the way up to his calves. An older gentleman appeared at the bottom of the stairs and started walking towards the bar. He shouted his greetings to everyone and then sat down next to Sam and adjusted his Red Sox cap before patting her on the back and saying, "Hey, Pumpkin, how are you doing?" "Hey, Mickey, I'm okay. How are you?" she replied, thankful that this really was like Cheers and everybody that came in was immediately greeted by name. They had a short conversation about life, how her day went, what he'd been up to, and then he turned to talk to some of the guys on his other side. Sam sat again, quietly listening to bits and pieces of everyone's conversations. She watched Monica mixing drinks, popping bottle caps, and laughing with everyone else. This place wasn't anything fancy, with its older local clientele, its ancient wooden paneling, and its grody looking orange carpet. But it already felt like a home away from home for Sam. She sat there, just enjoying the din of the bar, and settled back in her seat, taking another long sip of her Shutesbury squeeze. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thus ends chapter 17. So we have seen Sam explore the fact that she has, in fact, kind of created a little village of her own, a little found family away from home. Next week, she'll be exploring that a little bit further, but also next week, Nick comes back to kind of explore this whole situation with her. Anyways, to those of you who have come to the end, thank you so much for watching the whole thing. Please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Again, we will be back next Saturday, 7 p.m. Moroccan time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Thursday, the new Wattpad chapter will release. Same time, 7 p.m. Moroccan time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. All the while, there will be supplemental stuff happening in the shorts, both here and on TikTok. So check those out. On TikTok, I'm at Just Cats All the Time. On Insta, same thing, at Just Cats All the Time. Please check it out. Right. Again, we have a lot of cat content happening, but we're going to have a lot of life in Morocco content. You know, moving to Morocco, why I moved to Morocco, life before Morocco, what is life like in Morocco? I'm just going to keep saying Morocco, Morocco, Morocco. But there's also going to be various stories. Like I've been teaching I've been teaching for years. So I have millions, honestly, probably millions of stories. So please stay tuned, check out all my other content. Like I said, share, like, and subscribe. And thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. I appreciate you. As always, go out this week, spread some sunshine, spread some love, spread some kindness, lead with this, and I will see you next week. I love you all so much. I will see you next week. All right. Bye. Testing volume on this microphone. Yeah, well, we good. Let's get her done. Authors know.